Hello, Elise Dallas.
Hello, Fiona.
Welcome. We are talking tonight about midlife health and those insidious little things that sort of start to sneak up on us and, put our health in danger for later in life, what we can do about them and how we know. Now, before we get there, let me just give you a brief introduction. Everybody, this is Elise Dallas, who is a GP. You've been a GP for more than 20 years or so now. Special interest in women's health, not nearly as long as I've been a journalist. Special interest in women's health, especially menopause. Worked at Babylon, pulling their program together for that. Now at the London General Practice, where you're actually working on quite an interesting program on midlife health and seeing whether or not you can actually get things sorted within 3 months, which is quite exciting.
Yeah.
We shall get to that though. But in the meantime, before we get to that, I mean, I know I've put on 10 kilos in the last decade easily. Why does that matter?
Why does the weight gain matter and what that's showing the difference in your body?
Yeah.
So, I mean, midlife in general is between the ages of 40 and 60, 65-ish. And actually that's been shown to be a critical window for not only where menopause occurs, but it accelerates and brings in other chronic diseases that are quite silent and we might not be aware of. So when you're talking about specifically weight around the middle, that might be a sign of, for example, insulin resistance. And menopause, as we know, on average, last period for 12 months, just a quick reminder there for everyone, is on average around 50, 51. So right in the middle of midlife. And so some of these silent symptoms are happening for independent of menopause and the lack of estrogen, and it might just be aging. However, something like insulin resistance has been shown to be linked with menopause. So the hormonal changes, what insulin resistance is just a really kind of very simple explanation is that, we're eating lots of sugar, glucose. Insulin is like the truck. It takes that sugar to where the muscles are needed, where it's needed in the muscles. And then the muscles go, actually, God, we've got too much. All the cells in the body say, no, we're enough. We don't need any more. But because we've got so much sugar in the blood, the pancreas, which produces insulin, produces even more insulin to try and get rid of this sugar. And what we end up having is something called insulin resistance. And the reason that is important is because it's a major, major risk factor for cardiac disease, so heart disease, and our head, brain disease. But in terms of the fat around the middle, this is one of the markers where our estrogen, as our hormones are declining, so our estrogen is declining, we have a move of fat, so redistribution. And as you've probably noticed, as I certainly have, is that legs and arms pretty much staying the same, but getting this fat around the middle. And that's called visceral fat. When it's round the organs, it's called visceral fat. And that's actually really dangerous fat. That is not the same as sort of cellulite. That's not the same as, our flabby bingo wings. It is completely different type of fat, and it's dangerous fat. And so what it does is when the pancreas and all the internal organs are covered in fat, then there's a higher risk of diabetes, which again is another risk factor for developing heart disease. But the other thing is when you have got this when you've got this fat redistribution, also the fat cells are going, oh my goodness, there's no room here. And so what happens after it's coated the organs here, it starts coating the heart. And so it's also showing that there's an increase in heart fat, as it were, not necessarily because it's just the heart, but just obviously that's more dangerous. So in a very quick answer to what you've said, the reasons are because of insulin resistance, which happen for various reasons. We're more sedentary at this age, our hormones decline, and trigger off lots of other sort of cascading effects.
So basically, metabolism. A little bit like a perfect storm. So we've got, this sort of slightly more sedentary lifestyle. Most of us, I know I have. I mean, as I said to you before, I haven't been outside for 2 days until I just went out.
Easily done.
Yeah. So most of us are more sedentary. We've lost a bit of muscle mass. We're round around the middle, although I seem to just be rounder everywhere. And that, even though we sort of, because we think, most of us would probably know that visceral fat is doing our heart harm, but we probably wouldn't really think about it actually being metabolically active and affecting other things like the blood glucose and like lipids as well. It does seem to have it seems to have a life of its own.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about insulin resistance is that you could have the perfect diet, you could have the perfect exercise regime, and you've still got someone suffering from insulin resistance because of their stress levels. And if you have got really high stress levels, you're producing another hormone called cortisol, and cortisol wants that glucose in the bloodstream to be taken for your sort of fight and flight response. So it's going to hamper insulin's work and block insulin's actions. So it actually, I will have a lot of patients that are saying, oh, but I'm eating so well, and I'm doing all the right things. And actually, when you look at their lives, they're really stressed. They're high up in their careers, and they're not coping as well as they might have, and they might have some bad habits, because obviously also lifestyle plays a part in all of this.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're just not coping with the carbohydrates that you might have been able to get late night out. We can't cope with carbohydrates as well as we could.
Yeah, I went on a metabolic retreat a couple of weeks back.
I know, I saw you lifting that weight. Inspiration.
Although I was talking to a physio last night, and she was saying, everybody's like deadlifting 30 kilos, and I'm thinking, I thought I'd done really.
No, I did about 2. So I'm hats off to you, Fiona. I want to be like you. I'm an inspiration. If you can do it, I'm just hoping I can.
Juliet Balfour was my inspiration. I thought, if she can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
But they gave us those little glucose meters, and I know there's a bit of debate about whether or not fit and healthy normal people should actually use these. But it was interesting, just as an experiment more than anything else, just to see what the food you ate did. Yeah. And I pushed it when I got home in the last week. I really pushed it. I brought out the 3 Ps. I thought, okay, I'm going to have pizza, I'm going to have Prosecco, and I'm going to have over. So I really did push it. Just
what happens?
Actually, it was pretty good. In the middle of the night, it went a little high. That was the interesting thing. Sort of in the middle of the night, I think it touched on just under 7. So. Okay. Yeah, but nothing sort of, it wasn't 13, 14, 16 or anything, particularly extraordinary. It seems they pretty much pushed it the whole time. I don't know why. I don't, because I really did push it. But do you think there's any value in people sort of maybe giving that a go for a couple of weeks, just to see, do we create a worried well, or do we put it in a good insight?
I think it's difficult to say in terms of why you're doing it. We probably all know what will push it and spike it, and the symptoms that you might be suffering from if you are sort of having that slight insulin resistance and not being able to tolerate carbohydrates anymore, is that kind of waking up at 3 a.m. or having that after lunch slump. And so if you're one of those types of people, the other way to also do it, which is actually better than a BMI, is your waist to hip ratio. So you measure your waist and you measure your hips, and if your waist is bigger, so if it's more than 0.8 or more than 1, then you could be on the way to having a bit of insulin resistance. Everyone could get a tape measure tonight and just see if they're at risk.
I'm not doing that. I already know. I can't see.
Well, no, I did it as well, and I'm at risk as well. It's actually, you've got to be quite trim to balance out that ratio.
That's very true. I have a question over here for you from Sam. Sam is asking, is there a blood test for insulin resistance?
Insulin resistance is, not directly. We wouldn't measure insulin, for example. But what we would do, because it's a cardiovascular risk factor, we would measure all of those. So when I see someone, in short, in the answer to that, we would be measuring all of the cardiovascular risk factors. So we'd be looking at your high blood, your blood pressure. You would be looking at your lipid profile. We'd be looking at HbA1c. That's the measurement of sugar within the blood over 3 months, the average. And we would be really using as a cardiac calculator to assess your risk. There are other things that we can do in terms of your risk. If you're at greater risk of cardiac disease, because that's generally one of the risk factors it comes under, you can then go on to have further cardiac screens. So one of them is, I don't know if you've heard of it, is calcium scores, and is the risk of getting atheroma or getting a thickness in their lining, and that's where the heart attacks come from, or the strokes. And so, but calcium score on its own isn't that great, because this is where more research needs to be done into women and cardiac disease, because actually women have less calcium atheromas. So it's actually probably getting a CTCA, so where you actually look at the coronary angiogram and see where the plaques are, and a carotid Doppler, so like an ultrasound on your neck where the plaques could be. And actually, I was speaking to a cardiologist this week, and he said if those are clear, if those two scans are clear, then you are free from atheroma for the next 10 years. I mean, obviously the clock could come from somewhere else, but it's quite a reassuring test to do, and probably repeat it after 5 years. But no, you wouldn't say, you wouldn't go to the GP and go, I'd like just an insulin resistance test. This is all of the markers are there in terms of that hip waist ratio. That pretty is a good indicator. And I would be looking at it all together. So if someone came to me with menopause, I look at their symptoms, and then I'm looking at, okay, the symptoms could be either menopause. So I would often have a symptom tracker, but the symptoms can be something else. And so I might be doing bloods to rule out other markers, things like thyroid or vitamin deficiencies. And then there'll be the silent symptoms, where I'm looking for that myriad of, markers from the blood, just for the cardiovascular markers, like I've just discussed, and bone health as well. And also see if there are other risks of the cancers, and are they up to date with the NHS screenings? Because these are, if you're not having symptoms from them, you wouldn't go and say, oh, can I have a test for my insulin resistance? So this has to be picked up as screening.
You may not even know. I mean, you may have symptoms, but you may not even notice. Like,
exactly.
First, that why am I tired at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? Those sorts of things. So, what sort of things should make somebody think, oh, maybe I actually ought to go and ask about this?
Well, this is where you've got to be proactive, and you've got to advocate for yourself. I think you posted something earlier this week that, and I think I commented on it about, you should have had an NHS well woman check from the age of 40. So because, and then you said you had one, I was like, oh goodness, this is what we're going to have to bring up. So like I say, in your 40s, where you're having, perimenopausal symptoms, I would be going along to a doctor to just look at that. We don't need to do blood tests to diagnose menopause, but we might be thinking of other things that might be causing those symptoms, like fatigue. Lots of things can be causing that. Insulin resistance, and vitamin deficiencies, vitamin D, iron. If you're, in the perimenopause, often your periods become a lot heavier, and so you can actually become quite anemic. And then I would be also prompting your doctor to say, well, actually, I'd like to look after my bone and heart health, and go through those risk calculators. So for you'd have a cardiac risk calculator that you'd put some blood markers in, so you'd have some blood taken for that, like the lipids and the HbA1c. And then also for bone, it would be going through another bone calculator, which we call the FRAX score. And you may or may not need a DEXA scan, because a DEXA scan is used to look at bone density, because osteoporosis is another big risk factor for later on.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just take you back there for a second. So, okay, if we're thinking about blood sugar, the things that might make us think we need to get this checked out are feeling tired, feeling thirsty,
feeling hangry, that kind of like, I need to eat now, or I'm going to, lose it. Having that real slump after lunch, waking up often in the middle of the night. So it's sort of that 3 a.m. wake up. But if you're listening to it, aren't these mimicking what perimenopause symptoms could be as well? So often that, you're waking up, you get insomnia. Okay, well, you could have vitamin D deficiency where you're sort of aching and tired. You could have anemia where you're also tired. So thyroid disease would give you similar symptoms. So it's just one of those things to consider, as opposed to just thinking, oh gosh, could I be perimenopausal? Because it's great that all the awareness is out there. We now know it's not just about hot flushes, it's about all of these other symptoms. But also what I want people to go away with is not just thinking, I want to be diagnosed with perimenopause. I want to be looking at what's my future risk of developing these, and can I be doing anything about it? Because obviously by managing menopause with possibly HRT and lifestyle, you'll be managing those chronic conditions. So yes, tiredness, big weight around the middle, and waking up.
Yeah.
And that slump, they would be.
You mentioned iron there, and iron's a really interesting one because we don't pay an awful lot of attention to that as well, especially if you are bleeding a lot. And as everybody everybody knows, I'm bleeding all year, and and didn't really think about it all that much until I was sort of walking up. I started losing hair, like hair recently, and I live on the first floor, and so I take the stairs, and I get to the top of the first floor, and I think, God, my legs are
exhausted.
Yeah, and I think, and then one of the GPs who I spent a lot of time talking to said, "Are you taking iron?" And I thought, no. So I went and got some, and literally probably within about 3 or 4 days, the tiredness going up the stairs was gone.
Okay, because iron is actually quite. So I do want to say this is if you go and get your ferritin. So ferritin is another word for iron. That's the. So you might not be anemic, but I want people to go and get their ferritin done. And that is an indicator of how high their iron is. And often it will be reported as normal because I think it only has to be between 13 and 150 to be normal. And you'll be saying, oh, yeah, that's fine. But ask for that actual number of ferritin, because if it's under 60, 70 for women, then it will mimic the same symptoms of iron deficiency anemia. So hair loss, tiredness. Mine was 21 at the beginning of the year. So, I know that I'm iron deficient, but it was reported as normal. So then the other thing that I would suggest is iron isn't the best thing to take orally. I'm sure you've probably experienced it. It messes with your tummy and gut, and you can either have constipation or diarrhea. So my suggestion would be to take it with vitamin C. So sometimes it's combined with that, or with a glass of orange juice, and taking the maximum dose on alternate days. And that was a tip from a gastroenterologist. So because it absorbs better, because it's just the gut doesn't really like iron, it irritates it. So, and obviously increasing it in your diet.
And the other thing that I would say is ask your pharmacist, because as I discovered, when you go in and you look at the shelves, and I was looking at these and I was thinking, none of these are what I want. So I actually spoke to him and he said, well, I'll give you the good stuff. And the good stuff was something like £15 cheaper than what was actually on the shelf.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Good. Well, I'm glad that, because sometimes the good stuff might be the most expensive. But yeah, as fine an iron that suits you. Some people like liquid iron. Some people have the tablets. Some people just do it by food alone. But yes, if you really max out on the supplement alternate days, it's better absorbed.
That does make a
lot. And then obviously trying to turn the tap off. If you're going to continue to bleed like that, either. Well, there's lots of different ways to deal with it during the perimenopause, whether it be hormonally, Mirena coil, tranexamic acid, but turning that tap off, because otherwise you're just going to keep becoming iron deplete.
It's been a long year. It's been a very long year. Other things you mentioned there are lipids. So we're talking about cholesterol there. Now, I know that the European Atherosclerosis Society has come out very strongly saying that we need around midlife to be monitoring women much better on blood pressure and on cholesterol, and that there are changes in the types of cholesterol that we have as we move into midlife, but very few of us actually really are even aware of what our levels are and what they should be. So how do you approach this with patients to say, basically, you need to come in and get your cholesterol measured, and do you think we're being aggressive enough in getting them down?
So that's where I think I sort of differ in terms of a menopausal clinic. It's like I'm doing the menopause and the whole women, health of the midlife health all in one go, and pointing out that certain, well, as you know, management, whether it be HRT or lifestyle, will help those. So it's first getting them to have that cholesterol done. So they will all have a cholesterol with the liver, the kidneys, the HbA1c. And so then we'll look at that cholesterol profile. They only use certain bits of it in terms of putting it through the Q-risk or the cardiac risk calculator. But essentially, HDL is our good cholesterol. I think it's 2.4 is the maximum. They don't know if going any higher will give you any greater benefit. And we really need, so LDL is our bad cholesterol, and we really need to basically get that as low as possible. So the cardiologist that I was discussing last week, he aims actually for under 2.2. So really
easy. One of the ones I was talking about said 1.8.
Wow. Yeah. So I think at the moment it's like under 3. That's kind of the guidance we've always been given, and so we're happy with anything under that. But I think you just got to be really aggressive with that. And when we're talking about 0. When we're not talking about a familial, so hypercholesteremia, where it's in your genetics to have very, very high cholesterol, then a lot of this can be done through diet, exercise, reducing the alcohol, obviously smoking, and all the typical boring things that you hear us go on about, because it does work. And HRT can also play a big part in that. Sorry?
I don't think people realize that smoking actually does impact on the way the body treats fats like that.
Yeah, I think it's more, it doesn't increase the fat as such, but it makes it stickier and harder, the vessels. So it increases or decreases the elasticity, so it allows it to build up, because it makes everything thicker. The whole inflammation, then, and then obviously that's worse because of the low estrogen triggers off inflammation in the whole body.
The win-win situation, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I know.
Lucky us.
Welcome to midlife.
In terms of diet, then, so what sort of things should people be thinking about if they're wanting to get their cholesterol a little bit lower?
If they're wanting to get their cholesterol low, it's basically reducing things that we kind of love, like animal fats, and that could be anything. So obviously trying to have lean meats if you're going to have that, because obviously protein's really good to have. Cheese is a big one. People often go, but I don't even eat meat. And then I mention cheese, and they're like, oh yeah, actually I always have that. Alcohol can increase it and plays a big part, and anything saturated. So it's a saturated fat. So it could be anything, fried, cooked, any of these, sweet treats like biscuits, sausage rolls, all of those pastries, any, carbohydrates that you have in curries, takeaway meals. It's got so many hidden saturated fats. And I just think in this world where you're just grabbing something here and there, it's really easy to start, even though you think you've got a healthy diet, to start having hidden saturated fats. So that's what I would be advising to bring down. But then, it's difficult, because then you're trying to say, okay, we'll have calcium high in your diet because of the bones.
But don't have the dairy.
Exactly. So you've got to have the low fat or low saturated fat cheese, but then because it's not the good fats. So we obviously want good fats, and I always recommend people to take a supplement of omega-3, because that also helps. I mean, omega-3 does pretty much everything good: your heart, your brain, your skin, your hair, everything. So I'm a big fan of those supplements. But yeah, in general, and obviously doing exercise, so not just the dietary, but everything else.
Yeah. Just forgotten, a brain fog just went in my head, in one ear and straight out the other, that I was going to say was, so this, because we are now, what are we, up to around about 60% of people who are sort of overweight or obese. That number does seem to be going up, but then we get told then we have to be on a keto diet or low carb diet, or diets that would then actually probably, and conflicting messages sort of along the lines of, everything that they told you about fat doesn't matter anymore.
I think it's about balance now, and obviously there's huge amounts that's coming out about gut health and how hormones play a part in that, and inflammation. So it would be the most least processed foods you can find, because obviously lots of processed foods contain yeah, they're just not very good for us. So basically, if a food doesn't look like it, how it originally came out of the ground or existed, then that's processed. So reducing processed foods, eating as many, because what you're wanting to do is build up that gut flora, so probiotics, and eating, as many, fruits and vegetables of the, what they call the rainbow or the alphabet, a week. I think that they pulled out a number, 30 a week, but they're not really that sure. It's just about increasing your gut exposure to all of these. And then in terms of midlife, because we're naturally losing our muscle, we wanting to increase our muscle. So we want to really increase that protein. If we are going to have protein, then I think it's an easy way to think of it is like sort of 1.2, 1.4 grams per body weight that we are. And then if we're thinking about intermittent fasting, or at least where we having 12 hours where we're not feeding the gut all the time, so it's not stimulated all the time, 16-8 is probably preferable. But at least if we're not stimulating it for 12 hours, then that's also preferable to just sitting and munching all the time. And if we're thinking about protein, then and you're only going to have 2 meals, then you've got to think, I don't want just to eat all my protein in one meal. Lots of people go, I have a soup at lunch, and then I have chicken and everything in the evening, but you've actually got to split that protein up. So I would be thinking of sort of 30 grams ish of protein per of those 2 meals, not snacking in between. And then complex carbohydrates are fine, because they give you energy, they break down slowly. And so I haven't got a problem with carbohydrates at all. And then reducing saturated fats. So you're having the good fats. The monosaturated fats and polysaturated fats. So avocados, the omegas, oils, the flax seeds, those kind of oils, absolutely fine. So, and then all of the vegetables. So and if you increase it to have more of a plant diet, that's probably best as well.
Yeah. And if you have a bit of protein at lunch, that you probably don't need to snack as much during the rest of the day, because it really carries you through.
Exactly. So protein fills you up much quicker, and so you're not so hungry all the time. I think sugar is a little bit addictive. So if you're used to that sort of sweet treat, or I don't know if you've ever been used to sort of having something sweet afterwards, it can take a little bit of a while if you cut that out to get used to it. But after about a week, then you're fine. You might get a bit of a headache initially when you're cutting it out. But I would always sort of have the 80-20 rule, where you eat well 80% of the time, and 20%, go for it and have what you want, your takeaway, you go out for a meal. Because as we know, this isn't about going on a diet. This is about living for the next 30 years. And you've got to do something that's sustainable.
Absolutely.
So, and just finding habits that kind of suit you. So, but if you have that general rule of I think it's just about being more mindful, isn't it? About when you take something and you've got the choice of, toast or yogurt for breakfast, you'd probably go for the yogurt and sprinkle some seeds on it. So it's just trying to make that choice each time. But
yeah. Introducing one extra vegetable to your meal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think the thing is, everything you've got to do everything all at once, and then it just becomes impossible, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you've got to find ones that you like, and I like particularly crunchy things. So I always put in seeds on, or raw carrot, so that's what my go-to. But other people, might not like that. So just finding something out of all of that you like, and just making sure your fridge always has it in it.
I actually made chia seeds for breakfast the other day, which I call them frog spawn, because that's kind of like in the end. It was very nice, and it does fill you up. Put a bit of yogurt on top of that, and it's a bit of fruit, and it's nice. You mentioned bones there. Now, speaking of posts that people take absolutely no notice of are posts on bones. Literally no notice of, which is a shame.
Well, I think that's where we had the conversation, because it was National Osteoporosis Day last Friday, wasn't it? And so I posted something in a magazine, and you posted something, and we're like, what health check?
This is it. I mean, the thing, 50% of people over 50 will have some sort of fracture. These fractures cost the NHS
huge
amounts of money.
Yeah.
If they are severe enough that it results in us having to have a hip replacement or things like that. I mean, I don't want to scare the heebie-jeebies out of people, but the chances are of you dying in that year are pretty high.
Yeah. 5 times more likely to die that year from a hip fracture, and you're 80% likely to lose your independence.
Yes. And that's me in a nursing home, and that's not fun because the food in a nursing home is not good.
You certainly won't be getting your omega-3s and your high protein. Put it that way.
Exactly. So, so bone health, and you mentioned DEXA scans there before. What are things that people can do to make sure that their bones are healthy? When should people kind of think, oh, actually, maybe I haven't done enough, and I should have some sort of check? What do we do?
So bones, like you said, really important. Estrogen is a definite. It helps with metabolism. And so an estrogen, when we lose it with menopause and we're not replacing it, our bones are at risk, fact. So what we want to be doing is, well, we actually start losing bone from the age of 35. So really getting in that weight training, getting in that resistance training, because if we're sort of pushing on bones, if you imagine an astronaut, all astronauts, because they've got no pushing and pulling on bones, they all develop osteoporosis. So we're trying to do the opposite. We're trying to push and pull on the bones and create that kind of bone turnover. So we need to put in resistance training, whether that be your own body weight, like Pilates or something, and weights. I think that should be just made sexier for younger women. You know, instead of we're part of this aerobic culture where it was, you know, Kalinetics and aerobics and all of that. And so I think it's much better to now introduce weight training as a normal to make you strong. I also think that you need vitamin D. So vitamin D, obviously, we know that goes down in winter. And so to always be on a supplement maintenance if you live in this country. Again, I was low. I mean, white skin, but because I work inside and so it's always low. So I always take a supplement. Calcium as well. Again, it's still better taken through the diet, because calcium supplements are now linked with heart disease in terms of building up that calcium plaques. But that's not to say you can't take calcium supplements, but just try if you can, because we always used to give it AdCal. We always used to give it with its vitamin D. And now we don't. We separate it out and try and get people to have it through the diet. So aiming for about 1,000, 1,200 milligrams a day of calcium, things like tinned fish, because it's got bones, and dairy. And so with and obviously smoking, massive no. It really affects bone health. And I think that's, well, apart from the hormones as well. So, you know, obviously losing estrogen. So we know that HRT really significantly helps bone, although it's not in the sort of primary prevention guidance, and neither is it in the cardiovascular guidance, HRT. But I just want people, and I'm saying obviously lifestyle is big, but I just want people to be very well informed before they make that decision of whether they want to take HRT for bone and heart protection.
Yeah. Is there anything else? Like, we've done bones, we've done thyroids, we've done lipids, Oh,
I was just going to say, just in terms of bones, when you're at risk. So I'll always ask. So in terms of bones, you could be at risk of having thinner bones, and this is, I mean, you know, to warrant a DEXA scan. So a DEXA scan sees what your bone density is, and you can get it on the NHS if you fit certain criteria. But just in general, if you've had a history of steroid use, so steroid, you might be an asthmatic or had it for another inflammatory disease. So if you've had more than 6 weeks of steroids, that can put you at high risk of decreased bone. If you've had a parent that's got osteoporosis, I mean, I've got my mother, but then she was denied HRT back in 2002 when we all threw it in a bin and I was at medical school. So she's now suffering now. If you had an eating disorder, and your body mass goes below a BMI of 19, you might be at risk. And that counts for even when it was years ago, because that's when you were possibly building up your bone when you were a teenager. And so you may have not made the strongest bones going forward. So that's why we start young. If you've got inflammatory disorders like rheumatoid arthritis, if you've got malabsorption syndromes, so Crohn's or celiac disease, then this may put you at further risk, or if you've smoked in the past. So if you've got any of those risk factors, or you've had a fragility fracture, and a fragility fracture means falling from the, you were standing there and you fell and you broke a bone, because we wouldn't expect a normal person to break a bone. Fair if you were skiing or something, but not a fragility fracture means when you shouldn't normally break a bone. You should be having a DEXA scan and having a screening test. But I have to say that the women that I have and who choose to then be screened, and they're, late 40s, quite a few of them have come back with osteopenia. So, and it wouldn't change my management and osteopenia is just before you get osteoporosis. But what it does is it really drives their motivation to then go on and do weight training, make sure they're having their calcium, make sure they're having the vitamin D, because you can reverse it. You can get it back to normal bone. You can build it up, and you don't have to have HRT. HRT can really help with that. But you can do it without it as well.
Yeah, it's good to actually, you kind of think, well, if it's down, that's it. I'm down and out. But you can actually really make a difference by changing your lifestyle and.
Oh God, really do. Yeah, I mean, I would always be looking at all 4 pillars. So I mean, there's first of all, there's nutrition, and I would always be saying food first. People always ask about supplements. Because we live in a world where we want a quick fix, and it takes a lot of time and effort to make an unprocessed meal with everything fresh and organic, and so
I think I saw yesterday menopause chocolate. Somebody posted something about a special chocolate for menopause.
Why was it special?
I can't remember. I think it had B6 or something in it. I don't know. That added something to
it. Or something in it.
Yeah.
But people often ask about natural. So, for example, they might ask about things with soy or phytoestrogens, which are plant estrogens, saying, oh, well, will that help? And I always just say, well, what are you taking for? Is if it's for the current symptoms that you might be having. So if you're having hot flushes, there has been some evidence that it reaches levels enough to just about help that. But if you're taking it for your prevention of osteoporosis or heart disease, then it's not going to reach those levels in your blood to help with that. So people always like, oh, I just want to do everything naturally, and that's fine. But I really honestly want to just say, if we use Body Identical, which is the gold standard HRT, I don't think there's anything more natural than something being identical to your own hormones from yams, so from vegetables, and regulated. So I just want people to consider all of the options before they say that they're going to go completely natural. Yeah. Obviously, those that choose not to take it, and that's absolutely fine, and there's certain circumstances which you can't, but I think it has to be an option. And then that's in terms of the nutrition pillar. Oh, sorry.
We have a question here from Pause Live asking, what supplements would you recommend then?
Okay, so what supplements? So vitamin D, because you can't get it from your food. I would also recommend possibly always omega-3 as well. And you're looking at the EPA content. And the other one, I can't remember quite what it H something, but make sure it's a really good quality omega-3. Magnesium, and it can come in lots of different. So there's glycinate magnesium, which is quite good for your bones. But there's I don't know if you've heard of magnesium threonate, which is the only one that actually crosses the blood-brain barrier. So it actually has been shown, there's been studies shown that it's helped depression and cognition. So mine arrived last week. I was very excited. So I've just started taking that. Collagen, potentially, there have been studies that do show an improvement in more tissue strength, but the jury's still out, and it's a very expensive one, but it's something, if there's a deal out, I go and get collagen. So, because lots of people swear by it in terms of skin and hair. Zinc you can get from your diet, But if you don't like oysters, which is where oysters are very high in zinc, then possibly taking zinc. B vitamins as well. They are like getting a B vitamin complex. That's quite good to take. And iron if you need to, but only taking it until your ferritin is above that level.
Yeah.
Of 60 to 70. But let me see. I think they're the main ones. But like I say, it's always better to take it with food, because often they come with the fiber and the antioxidants or the polyphenols that come with it.
Yeah. Mag 38, she's asking, is that what you said? Or I would quote, did you say
magnesium threonate? So it's THR3onate, EONATE. I think that's how I spell it.
There you go.
If you look up, it crosses the blood-brain barrier. So that's something that has been recently shown.
Good. All right. So we've got diet, exercise, sleep, getting your stress under
sleep. Yes. So sleep's a good one, because if you have low sleep, then you can trigger off your metabolic syndrome, which is again this affects the whole metabolism. So what we recommend is at least, and obviously with menopause, the fluctuating hormones can mean that your sleep is disturbed. There's lots of things that can disturb sleep. Insulin resistance or alcohol, where you sort of helps you go to sleep, and people are using it for stress relief, and then they're waking up early hours. Depression, mood. And so what we're aiming for is 7 hours, or 7 to 9 hours, 8 hours, and it's actually important to get it in before midnight. So the ideal time is 10 to 6, because that's it basically regulates hormonal production. So
I'm a late person. I'm
a night owl, and it's really difficult. But I have noticed recently I've been absolutely exhausted, and actually thought, okay, I'm going to listen to my body instead of switching the screen on and trying to go to bed, and thinking, oh, well, I'll wake up really early, but I don't. So I obviously need it. But so getting that sleep in. People often have those glasses, to shut out the blue light. We haven't gone that far, but if it helps you, I mean, you've got to look at what helps your sleep or not. And so, some people, and if you're taking HRT, just as aside, if you're taking the Eutrogestin, which is the micronized progesterone, that's got a nice sedative effect. So lots of women that I have on it, obviously, that's a nice welcome side effect. And then in terms of stress and well-being, depression alone is an actual independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease in women, and it increases their chances of heart attacks and strokes. So it's been shown just 5 to 10 minutes every day doing something, or actually just doing nothing. So meditation, just sitting there quietly. You don't have to sit there with your sort of whole meditation music or anything, but taking time out for yourself. I mean, Calm, the app it's got a free bit where you can try this every day, but over time that will lower your threshold of stress, and then again that reduces the cortisol, which can trigger off insulin resistance. And we all know if you have a good sleep, you're less stressed, you make better choices the next day. Everything, all of these lifestyle or pillars, they all impact one another, don't they? So it's just doing everything at once, I think, people find quite overwhelming. And so replacing your hormones can often be that catalyst to help you get rid of those symptoms that might have been preventing you from making those changes, might help your aching body, or might help you sleep through the night, or might help those hot flushes, or that brain fog, or low mood and anxiety, and then help you then to make better choices and give you that kind of stimulus to, just change some of those lifestyle.
Yeah. Interestingly, and I know some people probably already have seen this, but and I do need to get on top of an Excel spreadsheet. But remember how they came out a few weeks ago with the this is my version of an Excel spreadsheet.
It looks like you've been in prison and you're counting off your days.
Well, it feels a bit like that sometimes, I will say. Remember how they came out of a few, well, probably I can't remember how many weeks ago now, but a number of weeks ago they came up with that study for 16 to 55-year-old women to talk about their reproductive health. And I was so incensed because, as you know, I get incensed very easily, that I thought, what about the 14 million other vaginas in the country
who are after 55? Exactly.
I pulled together my own survey and then analysed the first. So this is the analysis of the first 70 responses a few weeks ago, and literally, when you look at it, as you're saying there, they all impact on each other. Sleep: 76% of people said that they had sleep difficulties, and then when you look at all of the other things that are going to keep you up at night. Vaginal dryness, 63% of them. You've got that itching and burning, and it wakes you up in the middle of the night. You've got the anxiety and the low mood, waking you up in the middle of the night. You've got the stress urinary incontinence, getting you up and you're going to the loo 15 times. You've got your hot flushes and your night sweats, which do persist beyond the age of 55, believe it or not. So unless you get all of these sorts of things under control, you then find the next day you've got the brain fog like 73% of them had because you can't sleep.
Yeah, so, exactly. And but just bringing up vaginal dryness, I mean, if anyone, I mean, I'm sure all your listeners know all this already, but you know, taking vaginal estrogen has pretty much zero risk. So if you have any vaginal dryness, which is, I mean, people don't believe me when I say that it can trigger incontinence, but you know, urge incontinence, stress incontinence, it will make it worse. And then you've got the link with urine infections. And so obviously, if anyone's suffering from that, please, you know, go and get some cream or pessaries, because it is so easily treated and it works.
Yes. Interestingly, apparently, I just before we came on, I saw a post from Rachel Rubin looking at a plea from here, some sort of study that must have come out here, or they're asking for ways of improving. I haven't seen it myself yet, so this is secondhand information. But basically, it was running through all of the things that you could do to reduce your 800,000 hospital admissions in people over the age of 60 or whatever when it comes to UTIs, and they did not mention vaginal estrogen.
Yeah. Well, I think you posted something about how a dry vagina kills, and it's true, because what kills these little old ladies, or you know, there'll be us soon, it's these recurrent urine infections that aren't picked up, because the symptoms of urine infection are not the same in older women as they are in younger. You don't get that feeling of burning when you're peeing. You don't get that feeling of going to the loo frequently. You just will. We actually have a term for it called off legs, and that's what you feel. You just feel like doolally, and you don't feel right. And so, and you know, if you know of an older person, they just start acting a bit odd, they've got a urine infection. You know, 9 times out of 10.
It's mimic dementia, can't it?
Yes, totally. Totally. And then it's so easily, you know, rectified. But, you know, but prevention, as you know, is better than cure.
Yes.
And D-mannose is another one that's, I know this is not estrogen related, but D-mannose is a brilliant preventative of, and that's just cranberry extract. So that prevents the bacteria. So I've had lots and lots of good testimonials of that as well.
Yeah, that's getting some quite good evidence behind it, though, actually. I think, yes, it's not necessarily that it will, I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly how it works, but it's not necessarily that it will stop you from getting one, but if you do, it reduces the chances of it taking hold. As if you're getting one, as opposed to curing one.
Yeah. Oh, it won't cure one. And the other thing I do want to say, because I want to say about 2 people a week who have a urine infection, or they feel that they've had the symptoms of one, and they think, okay, I'm just going to take that Cystopurin, you know, the sachets from the pharmacy, and then it goes away. And then it comes back 2 weeks later, raging temperature and a raging infection. And I mean, you and I know, but that is not curing it. That all that's doing is neutralizing the pain and the irritation from it. So they think it's gone away. So please, anyone with a urine infection, you must get antibiotics, really. I mean, it's the only way to cure a urine infection, really, when it's got hold. So yes, just another one for your listeners. And yeah, and to wash down there with just water, no douching, and yeah.
Does anybody actually do that anymore? I mean, that is sort of the things that I would have associated.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. They use shower gel, and when I actually explain what douching is, I mean, I don't think they would necessarily call it douching, but they say, well, I get the shower and I, make sure it's all clean in there. And even if it's just with water, but they'll often have shower gel on. And so yes, they do. And lots use just shower gel in the shower. I literally say it about 5 times a week. So just water, or they'll buy these sort of femme freshes, but to be honest, water is just better.
Good question here from Sam, actually. Can older women start vaginal estrogen if they've never had it previously?
Yes,
in the 60s or 70s?
Yes.
There you go. That's pretty unequivocal then. Yes is the answer.
Yeah. And you can start HRT when you're older, but you just have to have because there's a timing hypothesis with HRT, with cardiovascular risk, going back to that, in the fact that if you've not had HRT, or so you've had no hormones for 10 years, the thought is that you've had those plaques build up. So let's say you have your last period at age 51, you don't have any HRT for 10 years, you're around, or 15 years, you're 65. Your heart vessels have suffered as a result from lack of estrogen, and have started to build up, because estrogen is very cardioprotective. It makes them all nice and bouncy and looks after it and keeps your lipids down and makes your arteries nice and flexible. So you've had that sort of furring up. And so the risk is, and this is what they found in the 2002 Women's Health Initiative trial, is, well, the average patient that they started was 63 and obese, and they started having increased cardiovascular events. But that's because they'd had this gap of 10 years. And so it's not saying that we can't start people who are suffering mid-60s or possibly even 70s, but we've got to look at what is their risk of developing cardiovascular disease, what's their lipid profile looking like, what's their HbA1c, what's their blood pressure looking like, what's their family history looking like, what is this primary prevention, what's their weight, are they exercising, is their diet good? If all of these parameters are good and their risk of having a cardiovascular event is very low, and they're having possibly symptoms, then I have no problem starting, but it does have to be discussed. But I would start at a lower dose. So with older women, they need less estrogen. And so I would start at a low dose. But no, in terms of vaginal estrogen, anyone can start it.
I could not imagine living without it.
Yeah. So, but people think it's a course. So you do have to do the sort of 2 weeks on and then just continue it. And I've seen people on funny regimes where it's 1 month on and 1 month off, and just twice a week thereafter, and whichever cream or pessary you're taking. And because unfortunately the vaginal atrophy, meaning withering away, it only gets worse. So it has to be sustained, and you've got to continue that. And the systemic, if you're on systemic HRT, then it reaches there, like the vagina, after about 4 months. So you often co-prescribe it at the beginning.
I was just about to show you my history, but I can't find it. Where's it gone? I love this. This is my favorite thing on earth.
There you go. Are you going to demonstrate how you insert it, or are we going to?
Not. That would be a little bit on the X-rated side.
But yeah, there you go. Fiona, not embarrassed about that at all. And that's brilliant, because I think that most women suffer from it. That's the saddest thing. And it's only when you really ask about it and sort of describe ways it can present. Is it itchy? Is it, do you get, pain during sex? And do you get urine infections? And does it feel like you have thrush? Oh, yeah, well, I've been diagnosed with thrush 3 times. Well, that's why. Yep. Because it takes it back to a prepubescent, vagina, where it's all dry. It doesn't have any of the discharge to protect it or lubrication. So, yeah,
it's not a fun place to be.
Ask and ask the right questions. So, and you'll find that most people do actually suffer from it. And when you say that it has no risk, why don't we just co-prescribe it at the same time? People are very welcome to it.
Yes, it makes absolute sense, and give it to every person in a nursing home.
Yeah.
Brilliant. All right, we have digressed, but that is all right. Is there anything else that we need to know or think about when it comes to midlife in terms of making sure that we've got the right checks and right?
No, I just want people to go away with, if they're suffering from menopause, firstly, obviously go and seek a healthcare provider about that. Check if it's not menopause, like could these symptoms be of something else, because thyroid disease goes up in perimenopause. Like I said, anemia can go up because of the heavy periods, vitamin deficiencies. So check it's not that. But then also push your provider, whether they might not have time in that one appointment, if it's with the NHS for 10 minutes to do the cardiovascular, the bone screen. But if you're doing bloods for the other stuff, ask them to fit in, your cardiovascular risks, your vitamin D, your calcium, and do your, the risk calculators. And then discuss the results, ask for your ferritin if, the actual result, because that might come back as normal. And then sit down with your provider to go through what your risk is of developing, whether HRT might be able to help you because it will help with bone health. It halves heart disease. And it will definitely help you. It's the gold standard for helping symptoms. It may not work for everyone, but just to know that. And then redo, actually set yourself some goals for 3 months, because it takes about 3 months for HRT to work. It takes 3 months for your cholesterol profile to change and come down if you're making changes. It takes 3 months for, thyroid to change. So 3 months is quite a good marker to actually make some goals and try and repeat everything that. So that's why it's 3 months. And make changes to your lifestyle, because if you make changes before the age of 65, it significantly alters your health outcomes. After that, it's okay, but it makes a massive difference before the age of 60, 65.
And speaking of challenges, you're doing the couch to 5K, which is very.
I know. So you caught me doing that. Yes. Well, yeah. I did it last time. I did it in COVID, and I loved it. And then I got plantar fasciitis, and forevermore my cardiovascular health has suffered. And there I am preaching on about it. It's the theme of menopause. Day last week, osteoporosis, and I didn't even plan on doing it. I was at the park, and I just thought, you know what, drop the kids. I'm gonna just do it, and started doing it because, and I'll just see how much I can get through. But it's a brilliant app. Honestly, I recommend it to anyone who's just wanting to start to get moving.
Yeah,
it goes really slowly.
A chat on Thursday with Sam Palmer about, if you haven't moved for 20 or 30 years, how do you start?
Definitely that one. Yeah. Definitely. And some, Pilates and all of that is brilliant if you've got the motivation to sort of do it at home. What I like about this app is it motivates you through it. You can listen to a podcast, and the voice comes, through it. So you can listen to both at the same time. So it really allows you to do something. And it's only half an hour, so it goes really quickly. So yes, I would definitely advise that.
Brilliant. Well done. All right, my lovely. Where do people find you? Should they want to find you?
If they want to find me, I work at the London General Practice up in Harley Street. I'm on Instagram. So I'm about to, Substack is something I'm about to launch something there. But in general, that's where you'll find me.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you very much for your time. And speaking of your children that you dropped and then ran, I will now let you go back to them.
They're downstairs watching screen, and I think they're very happy. Okay, thank you so much, Fiona, for having me.
My pleasure, lovely. And we'll speak to you soon. Take care.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.